Hello everyone, welcome back to the TJOmega channel for day 1473 of our daily content grind. So, this is another debate video, which means we start by looking at the results of the previous debate video, and this is pretty much exactly the way I thought it was going to go. Soundwave won the debate handily. Now, I kind of expected that. This was kind of a challenge to me, rather than try to have as divisive as a debate as possible. My goal here was to see how many people I could sway. How many people could I convince that Blaster actually might have a better roster of cassettes than Soundwave based purely on numbers? Though I will admit, Soundwave technically has the cooler and more varied cassettes. You know, like, okay, fine. Like on the little robot side wise, yeah, Rumble and Frenzy, they're kind of comparable to Eject and Rewind. But you've got too much aerial support. The Blaster does not have, like Laserbeak's way cooler than, Steel Jaw. Ravage is cooler than Steel Jaw and Ram Horn. Things like that. I kind of figured it was an uphill battle. I just wanted to see how much I could get away with. But yeah, it's not a surprising result. So this time I want to throw something at you that might be, because this is something that we have debated forever in the fandom, and it's one of those debates that we really should have talked about on this series a little bit sooner, because it is a major one. How do we feel about part forming? Because to some, it is a fun play pattern that a lot of Transformers do not take advantage of, that provides many of advantages. And to some, it's just flat out cheating and it's not a real Transformer. So we get to debate that here today, because it's something that we are still doing to this day. While Transformer engineering has modernized tremendously, and the engineering is so much better than it was 40 years ago, when things like removable fists and alternate, parts you had to keep aside was just a commonality amongst Transformers. Today it is seen differently. In the case of my Cronus here, completely new toy, so new that it still sits on my desk at the moment. However, the debate becomes, is this fair? Because it is a part forming toy. In order to transform it, you actually do have to remove pieces and place them somewhere else. Does that cheat? Or is that just taking advantage of different engineering? I know for me, I was disappointed when I found out that what this toy does, it accomplishes through part forming, because I was not made aware of that previously. If there was something in a Hasbro Q&A or like a behind the scenes Instagram post or something, I completely missed it. I knew it was going to be a weaponizer, but weaponizers have changed to the point of, like, we can make them transform without having to come apart to do it. I was hopeful that's what it meant. That's what I thought it meant. But no, he comes out as a part former. Now, he does come across an exceptionally unique Transformer toy because of it. Like, what he's doing is not possible with standard engineering. So he does provide something unique, but is he cheating to do it? I feel like he is an extreme example, because this is part forming unlike we have seen in a while. But when it comes to, like, modern day part forming, it can actually be pretty varied. For instance, Megatron. You don't think of this Megatron as a part former because it's just the one piece, but that one piece does not act as an accessory. A lot of parts that come off and become accessories, people give a pass to, and I don't really consider that part forming, so long as the piece makes sense and looks good as an accessory. Here, you don't really think of it that way, but the Megatron barrel here, it does not serve as an accessory. It is literally a part you have to pull off of the robot mode and put into the vehicle mode, because there's no other way to make it function. And that little barrel doesn't really act as an independent accessory. You could use it as such because it's 5mm ported, but it does mean it's a little bit of a cheat amongst what is otherwise an incredibly impressive Megatron design. And again, still on my desk because it's that good. You can use it as a blaster, I suppose, but that is not an intended or at least that's not, that's more or less just like a side effect of how it's intended to transform. I mean, it's just weird, right? It's just weird. So that's like more like what modern part forming is. There's usually a piece or two across the transformer that you don't really get to just transform properly. It has to pop off and pop back on in order to actually function correctly. So there is that to keep in mind. Part forming comes in very small ways these days, and usually it's things that aren't terribly detrimental if you lose them as well. Things like the original Starscream, on the other hand, yeah, this is such a common toy to find, is just the bare body, because so much of this thing comes off. The wings come off, all the tail fins come off, the landing gear comes off. Most famously, the hands come off. Seekers without hands is such a common sight. My toy shop has a Seeker without hands. So this is just something we've been dealing with since the original toy line. Now, back in 1984, it's because of technological limitations. You don't have a space in that transformation where those fists are going to go. And it was just kind of a commonality that little parts like that had to come off and be put back on. And we have other examples of that we're going to look at later in the video. But for Generation 1, it was pretty extensive. Like, we dealt with part forming all over the place. For the most part, everyone was kind of their own thing. But anyone with firing fists, usually those fists didn't fit in vehicle mode, so you gotta take them off and put them somewhere else. In the case of things like Omega Supreme. So this was not designed by Takara, let's keep that in mind, or Hasbro. This is a completely different toy company that provided this figure. So it doesn't hold the same standards of Transformers, but it was the largest figure in Transformers for a time. And the fact that it was required to basically disassemble it and reassemble it into its alt mode, that was very different at the time. The truth is, there's not a whole lot on him that really does much transforming as a result. So, how much cheating is that? Like, does that count as cheating? But of course, back then, very different standards. But even the smallest was not immune to this. You had Scamper, who had arms that had to come off and then be plugged into the side in order to fully transform. There were other ones that did this even before Scamper. We go even all the way back into Diaclone. You had the powered buggy that came with powered convoy, and that one also had arms that you had to pop off in the vehicle and pop back on into the robot mode. The tech wasn't there to get part, because for whatever reason, right? Because we've had Transformers that small that didn't have to do that. Just for some weird reason, that was the option they went with on some of these like cheaper ones, which I guess, yeah, it's just a budgetary thing at that point. So it's something that every size scale had to deal with, and mostly kept to the last 2 years to the first 2 years of Transformers. But year 3 introduced a different type of part forming that we do see a lot more these days, and it does get me frustrated. And I find I get more angry at this than a lot of people do, apparently. And that is when huge chunks of the vehicle are pulled off just to become a shield. This is part forming to me. Yes, you are reusing it as an accessory, but there is a difference here, right? Like, there's a difference between a piece that comes off and genuinely looks like something, and just carrying a third of a Volkswagen Beetle as a shield. Now, when it comes to like the Megatron, for instance, yeah, that little barrel would make a very boring gun if you just turn the 5mm peg and put it in his hand to work as a gun, but it could technically be a gun accessory if you wanted it to be, and it kind of looks fine in that role. Whereas this with Bumblebee, you literally just have a huge chunk of the car the designers didn't know what to do with, and he's just the answer is just put a handle on it and let him hold it. Say it's a shield. We had an RC that did the exact same thing. At least RC has the excuse of having so little bulk in her robot mode that you always have to come up with some way of figuring out how all of that car shell goes somewhere. So sometimes it's a huge and super dense backpack. Sometimes it's a surfboard that pops off of her for some reason. But it does still fall into the modern part forming scheme. Now, the alternative to this in the modern Transformer is to do something like RID Sideways did. Sideways is a figure who really does feel like he should have been a part former, but however, does manage a articulation method, doesn't manage a engineering system that does mean nothing really has to come off and go somewhere else. The exception is the bumper of the vehicle mode, but becoming a crossbow based missile launcher, I think, is a really cool use for it. See, it's different than just like the back of a car just being the shield, and using something that actually matches a natural shape and genuinely looks like what it's supposed to be. That's a way better option to me. It's a much cooler option to me. So yeah, there are situations where maybe part forming was the solution. Maybe part forming should have been part of Sideways or Sideburns engineering, because the transformation on this guy in order to prevent part forming is absolutely absurd. And there is a myriad of Transformers, especially like around the late 2000s, and like especially the Japanese Beast era, where the answer to avoiding part forming was a lot of shell parts that just hung off of a toy that just kind of were on like plastic ball joint stems to just move them into some floaty space behind or beside a toy. Maybe part forming would have helped, like maybe that is a situation where part forming wouldn't have necessarily been a bad thing. We see on the modern Sideburn toy, yeah, there's part forming to that toy too. It's the part that should have been part forming on this one. It's the top of the car. Now, yes, it's using, a third or a quarter of the Corvette mode as a shield. It has at least the decency to be the shape of a riot shield, right? So like that slight curvature actually helps with that. Whereas Bumblebee's shield literally is just a bubble of metal, which does not look like a shield. So I can see the difference here. There's a difference in my standards here, so bear with me. But I don't mind it so much on Sideburn. Yeah, it might have helped here. His engineering might have been a little bit smoother. Now, the advantage to part forming is these days we have worked our way around a lot of it, with like a lot of the parts that were originally pop off, put them aside, put them back on when you turn it back into robot mode. We figured out how to handle that now, when it comes to like the original G1 Optimus Prime. Finding one with fists can be a problem because those things were easily lost. I don't remember having fists to my G1 Optimus Prime. It was a yard sale purchase. They were probably long gone by the time I got my hands on it. But that said, it does present interesting design solutions when we revisit those designs in the modern age. Missing Link also is a great place to see this in action. It is neat to see how we've replaced the part forming that used to be necessary. And we've made great strides in that. Take a look at the Robot Masters convoy, and then come back and look at this version, which is going for the exact same thing, by the way. And yeah, it's a pretty stark difference. Like we've figured it out considerably better than we used to. So yeah, like we've come a long way. We've come a long way. And these days, part forming means something very different to us. Yes, there's little parts where it's still a factor. But as I said, now we have things like Weapon Masters. So part forming is not necessarily a great demon like it used to be. It's not necessarily an evil thing that is always going to be for the negative. This gave us rise to weaponizers, which allowed us to get in characters like Cog and Six Gun, who had otherwise been ignored in past releases, because now they can stand as their own independent toys, and they can still function the way they used to. Six Gun is all the parts of Metroplex that you don't need from robot mode. So, cobble them together and make an extra robot out of him, and he's just made up of a bunch of guns. It's what it says on the tin. So that was what the inspiration was for doing these characters in Siege. And that moves on to like not only all of the extra weapon characters that were part of Titans, or I guess City Formers back in G1, but moves on to other factors, So we got Junkions, that makes sense. We got modulators to replicate the Micromaster bases, all 2 of them, We got armorizers, fossilizers, which are probably some of the most inventive. Embracing part forming opened us up to so many new play patterns and types of Transformers we never would have had otherwise. So it's not as demonized as it used to be. But I also know there's still a lot of fans and diehards out there that see it as cheating. You know, like you should, like a lot of people who carry that thought of, you should be able to get a Transformer to go from vehicle to robot mode without any parts coming off and being put back on. Whereas a lot of people also just genuinely don't care. As long as both modes look good, they are A-okay. So that is where the debate comes from today. As always, in the description of this video, you will find a link to a straw poll link. Please go ahead and give that a click and make your voice heard. Next time we do a debate video, I will give you the response. We'll talk about it then. So that is your mission for today. Is part forming good or bad? Very simple debate, but it is an age-old debate amongst Transformers. So have at it. So that's what I got for you today. Thank you everyone for watching. I will see you next time. Hello everyone, I am Astral Agent Magnetar, a tokusatsu VTuber, and I am streaming 4 times a week over on Twitch, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday afternoons, and a special late night one on late Friday/early Saturday. So come watch, come hang out, and let's make an impact together.